So, good morning, everyone. My comments today are entitled Try the Other Handle, and this comes from Stoicism. I've been lately delving into the Stoics and seeing how much what they taught and what they wrote about lines up with the teachings of the Buddha. It's really quite remarkable, given where they were in such different parts of the world and different moments in history. So I've really gotten interested in this, and especially the writings of Epictetus, whose writings line up so well with the Dharma. So I want to talk about his words, the quote from him, try the other handle, which I think really resonates with much of what we talk about here, because what he's talking about there is the importance of perspective, the importance of adaptability, the ability to approach our challenges with fresh eyes, with a fresh outlook, with beginner's mind, if you will. And while the phrase originates in Stoicism, it really aligns pretty nicely with practical aspects of what the Buddha taught. You know, in Buddhism, the way we perceive and respond to situations is central to whether we experience suffering or whether we experience freedom. By trying the other handle, we are invited to shift our mindset, reassess our attachments, and explore alternative ways of approaching life's challenges. As you know, Buddhism teaches that so much, if not most, of our suffering arises not from external circumstances, but our response to those circumstances, from the mind's interpretation of those circumstances. And this idea, of course, is encapsulated in the first of the Four Noble Truths, that life involves suffering which is often rooted in our clinging and our craving or our aversion. The way we perceive and respond to any given situation determines whether we experience peace or whether we experience pain. When Epictetus advises us to try the other handle, he suggests that any situation can be approached from multiple angles. He understood, as did the Buddha, I think, that we each have habitual ways of perceiving and interpreting and responding to situations. Let me say that again, because it's central to today's topic. He understood that we have habitual ways of perceiving, interpreting, and responding to life situations. And we tend to just repeat those repeatedly if we do them without mindfulness, without awareness. The key here is that if one perspective, our habitual perspective, leads to frustration, leads to despair, leads to confusion, we can consciously choose to examine it from another angle, and thereby potentially finding greater clarity and greater peace in how we respond. This principle from the Stoics is mirrored in the Buddhist teachings on mindfulness and right view, which encourages us to investigate our thoughts and our emotions with curiosity and openness, not becoming entangled in them with our old habitual, unmindful ways of seeing them and responding to them. So let's just take a simple example. Suppose somebody insults me. From one perspective, habitual perspective, I might respond with anger, with hurt, with reactivity, instinctively react with defensiveness, with pride. But what if we step back and pause and reflect on that? What is the source of my anger? Is the insult truly about me, or does it reflect the other person's state of mind? You know, maybe it's about them. It has nothing to do with me. I'm just the recipient of their conflict, of their problem. By trying the other handle, we come to see that insult is not necessarily about me, and additionally, it's impermanent. It is conditioned by factors beyond my control, and ultimately not worth clinging to, not taking the bait. This shift in perspective, by just pausing and bringing mindful awareness to that interaction, can transform a moment of suffering into an opportunity for growth and understanding. And central to this practice, from a Buddhist perspective, is understanding impermanence and understanding non-attachment. Because these teachings remind us that everything in life is constantly changing, and our attempts and our clinging to fixed views, rigid expectations, old patterns of the mind, old habits of the mind, often leads to suffering. When we refuse to let go of a single perspective, when we lock on to one handle of a situation, we trap ourselves in this cycle of frustration and dissatisfaction. We are unwilling to step out of that and look at it differently. So trying the other handle is a practical application of non-attachment because it encourages us to loosen our grip on rigid interpretations. It encourages us to explore alternative ways of responding, of relating to our experiences in the world. So let's take another example, a challenging relationship with a coworker. Clinging to resentment or viewing the person solely through the lens of their faults may exacerbate the conflict. What if we try the other handle by practicing compassion or seeking to understand their perspective or seeking to appreciate what their suffering might be? We may discover a less reactive and a new way to relate to them, reducing tension and creating greater harmony. Mindfulness is a cornerstone of Buddhist practice, as you know, but it's also a practical tool for implementing Epictetus's advice of trying the other handle. When we practice mindfulness, we cultivate the ability to observe our thoughts, observe our emotions, observe our sensations, and observe these habitual patterns of the mind without judgment. And when we pause, when we notice and pause, we create that space between stimulus and response within which we get to choose how we engage with a situation. We tap the brakes enough to bring choice into the equation. We don't just habitually, reactively, mindlessly respond. This is a huge part of our practice and a huge part of reducing our suffering. For example, again, another example, when we're faced with a perceived failure, missing out on a promotion at work, for instance, the initial handle might be to dwell on feelings of inadequacy, failure, frustration. But what if we pause and investigate those feelings as they arise? Is the failure truly catastrophic? Or maybe an opportunity to learn and grow? Maybe there are deficits that we're in denial about. If we shift then our focus to gratitude for our current role and setting new goals to address those possible deficits, we try the other handle. We open ourselves to a more constructive and compassionate perspective. This is the middle way that the Buddha taught, a balance between extremes. And this principle can also be applied to this metaphor, to this idea of trying the other handle. It's not blindly forcing ourselves to adopt a positive outlook, kind of a Pollyannish outlook in all situations. But neither is it resigning ourselves and capitulating to negativity. It's a balanced approach, acknowledging the reality of our challenges, but remaining open to alternative ways of understanding and addressing them. We bring a curiosity to it. How could I be different here? Think about struggling with a personal loss. On one extreme, we might try to suppress that grief entirely, push it down, pretending it doesn't exist, denying it. On the other extreme, we wallow in it indefinitely. We just keep grieving. We won't let it go, year in, year out. In that instance, trying the other handle would mean allowing ourselves to feel the pain of the loss fully, but understanding and seeking comfort in the impermanence of it, that it will over time lessen by recognizing that loss is a natural part of existence. We've talked about this recently. We can let go of our tight clinging to that and find peace amidst the sorrow that we talked about on Wednesday. And then, of course, another teaching aligning with the idea of trying the other handle is the notion of interconnectedness we've been talking about recently, which reminds us that all phenomena arise due to causes and conditions, and we are deeply, and that are deeply connected to the world around us. When we broaden our perspective outside ourselves, outside our own egos, to include the experience of others, what might their experience be? We often are then trying the other handle by approaching situations with greater compassion, with greater empathy, with greater understanding. So back to when someone has wronged us, when we are in a conflict, how we're focused on how we've been wronged. But if we shift our perspective to consider, just for that moment, get our ego aside, their struggles, their fears, their motivations, we may find it easier to respond with kindness rather than anger. And I would suggest to you that I'd rather be experiencing kindness than anger in terms of my own suffering. Anger is a form of suffering, even if we feel self-righteous about it, even if we feel energized by it. Because this shift not only benefits the other person, which of course it does, but it frees us from the burden of resentment. We don't have to carry around that resentment. Epictetus's advice to try the other handle is a call to action that aligns beautifully with the Buddhist teachings on mindfulness, non-attachment, and compassion. He reminds us that our experience of life is shaped by our perspective and that we have the power to choose how we respond to challenges, provided we're willing to pause, to notice, to pause, and to step out of our habitual mental patterns of responding. We cultivate a flexible and open mind. We navigate life's ups and downs with greater wisdom and ease. In practice, trying the other handle means noticing, pausing, investigating our thoughts and emotions constantly, consciously, without judgment. Choosing a response that aligns with the principles that the Buddha asks us to practice: kindness, wisdom, equanimity. It is a reminder that no situation is inherently absolutely good or absolutely bad. Rather, it is our relationship to that experience that determines it, how we respond. Through the teachings of Buddhism, we learn to embrace this truth and better walk the path to freedom with clarity and grace. So there's a little bit of perspective on trying the other hand.